Hi guys, now we come to the actual painting part of it itself. I want to start by saying the end colours that you choose is totally up to you. You can follow my guide, you can do what you want. I'm just here to show you what is possible. So I think due to the size of this painting, I'm only maybe going to be using two sizes of brush. So I've got the 0 and the 2 currently. Maybe a bigger one later, but I'll let you know. So I've got my palette in front of me, my rinse water, my little egg cup of dip water, and I've also got the swatch guide just to reference if I need it as well, and my paper. You'll notice that I actually will dip a lot into the water and then straight onto paper to drain it a little bit. It's pretty much a constant for me. So even if I don't verbally say, drain your brush, dry your brush out, pretty much do it anyway, because it's a very important part of water control. And that's one of the hardest things with watercolor painting, being able to control the amount of water that's on your brush. You're better off going to your paper with a bit too little water than too much, because then you'll have to deal with that or wait, and it can cause problems in itself. So better too dry than too wet for my style of painting. So to start with, I think I'm going to do the borders. So first of all, I'm going to pre-wet this little slice, and here's where my pipette comes in. Grab a bit of water. As it's a couple of hours later, my paints have actually dried on the palette, so I'm going to just put a drop of water, in each of my paints, and by the time I need them, they should have re-wet. I think I got them all. So I'm going to start with the pink, the rose. All right, these brushes are a little bit bigger than what I'm used to painting day to day, so might have a bit of trouble with it, but we can move on. Okay, so I've spread the clean water onto the block first, which then means dropping my saturated colour onto it. It's just a little bit easier to spread around and make it even. You can paint dry on dry. One of the big problems with dry on dry is sometimes that first line that you paint will kind of get stuck or etched into the paper, and then you can't blend it smooth. It's always unpredictable how it does that, so unless you really know what you're doing, sometimes it's easier just to err on the side of caution. Just wet it down a bit so you can move it on. And given I like symmetry, what I'm going to do is the exact same on the opposite side. Not too much water, otherwise it'll be too washed out. And I'm going for a bright saturated effect here, so I want lots of colour. Okay. So what I'm thinking, I'm going to be blending these as I go down. So with the blend, what I usually do is dump the water in the middle. Okay, then you're going to put colour A on the top, colour B on the bottom, and as they reach that water pool in the middle, they'll start to blend, and it'll give you a lot more, it'll give you a nice clean blend. So, coloured that. Okay, see how it's just touching that water bit? Good, that'll be fine to stay for a bit. Do the other side as well. And there, that's starting to touch. Rinse my brush. Purple. So with the next colour to be blended, once again, I start from the very edge and move it up towards the water. There, it's just touched the water. Leave that alone for a second. Alright, now we're ready to blend them. So dry your brush a bit and just manipulate that water in the middle until it gives you a nice clean blend. You can always go back in with more pigment if you need to. Alright. Okay, so the next panel, just for, it's not enough water. Okay, I'm actually going to do the next panel without laying down the water first. So you can see how vibrant the colour comes down. If you want to match that vibrancy, you can go back and do the pink one again. Okay, and for this one, I want it to blend again into a blue. So grab my water brush. Okay, grab my water brush, water in the middle. Because seeing as I've already got purple on the brush, I want to continue going. Just about there. Okay, next colour. Into the blue. And I know in advance I want to make this one blue as well, so might as well paint ahead. And then move it up. Okay. So and this is when I manipulate that paint just in that center spot and just smooth it down into itself. Sometimes I'll keep a blotchy type effect, but usually I want a smooth effect. A little more pigment there. Okay. Clean my water brush because I can guarantee you it's picked up pigment. Moving down to the next block. And now I'm going in with the Payne's Grey. Look, she's a touch dry, brush is a touch dry. So I've got water on my palette, so I'll just wet that a bit. Now, obviously, if you go from one side to the other, your brush is going to drain itself of the pigment. So you just go back in, reload it, so that both of your sides are even. Okay, just in case I didn't put enough water in there. Blend the two. And I think I'm going to go over this side a bit. It looks a bit pale. Add some water in there. Bring that water up. So, looking at that, not quite as strong as I'd want it. So this is when I go back into the blue and just re-wet and give it a bit more strength. Whenever you go back into a colour that's already dried, you're going to end up with tide lines. So if that's the case, what I do is I re-wet the whole section again. So there's no visible lines of when I've gone back into it the second time. Okay, that's better. I've deliberately paused the video because I, on purpose, wanted my painting to dry because I wanted to teach you guys how to smooth out your blends a bit better. So double check that my paintbrushes are clean. Yep, they are. Alrighty. So alright, personally I don't like such a blotchy blend like these. I like them to be very smooth. So dip into your water. You're going to want to re-wet that section. And sometimes it works that just with a gentle brush it blends it out. Sometimes you'll need to add more pigment. So I'm okay with that one. Clean my brush, go to the next one. And it's just brush strokes over the whole area just to help blend those pigments through. Now, personally I find that a bit faded, so I'm going to add more pigment. What do we got? We got purple. Don't need much. Excuse me. Oops, that was a bit much. And then use the paintbrush to move it through the water. And now going into the blue. Bring that up from the other side. Dry paintbrush. And then just use the tip of your paintbrush just to blend. You're just moving paint through water basically. And it'll give a smoother blend. Once again, down to the bottom one. Wet the whole area. And then I'm brushing through. Okay, that needs a bit more colour. And that bottom section is just a bit too pale for me. So I'm going to go over it again and fully saturate the colour. Bit more blue in that top section. And use your paintbrush to push the paint around. Okay, once again, more saturation. So that's it'd be what, the second or third layer I've put on that. Bring it up. Bit of water in the middle. Go to your blue. Bring it down. Then blend through the middle. Okay. Bit more pigment up here. And that's looking a bit faded, so more pigment through there. And like I said, if you touch a dry bit, you're going to end up with a waterline, so you need to re-wet the whole area. Otherwise that line will come through and it doesn't look good. Okay, rinse. And brush that through with a bit of water. There. Now the pink area. Pink could do with a bit more saturation too. So I'm going to start at the top, come down into there. There, see, brushing through the dry, and then a bit of water, blend. Watercolour paint will dry a lot lighter than when it's wet, so I often have to go in and give something a second coat because it's just not enough saturation. And as long as you're careful, you can do that without it being noticeable. Okay, it's a bit blotchy for me, so blend. There. So I'm going to continue and do the bottom panel. Gonna need more water soon. One of the reasons I don't tape down my paintings, as you see a lot of watercolour artists do, is I am forever spinning my painting. I tried when I first started learning, and I just didn't like the way I couldn't move. So I don't tape down my watercolor paper. Okay, when your paintbrush is too dry, it'll skip across the surface like that. So carefully, just get a little bit more water onto your brush. Still not enough. So you need a certain amount of water to make it move smoothly. So. When you're painting sections, I always like to make absolute sure that one section's dry before I paint next to it. So in this case, I've done the outside. I'm going to skip that inside border and move into the painting so that when I do that inside border, I know there's no chance of it still being damp and then bleeding. So on the inside, with the rose, one way of pre-shadowing the rose is to glaze. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to be adding a little bit of the Payne's grey very, very lightly where the deepest of the shadows will be. Let that dry and then I'll be painting over it with the pink. So this is a time where you really want very, very watery painting. And like I said, this is now your swatch card. So turn your card upside down. This is where we test the wateriness. Okay, that needs more water. So I want it very, very, very watery. And this is why I drain that brush. I use a swatch card to see what the strength is on the paintbrush I'm using. And because we're not painting the full area, I want to get my water brush loaded up and ready to go. So the shadows on this would be in this area here. So paint that and go in with water brush and starting from that top of the area, blend down into it so it's a seamless paint job. And just be very careful when you're moving next to the next area. If it's too close or you've breached that, it's going to run. So just be very careful. You either jump to the third area and let that second area dry, or if you're absolutely sure, you can move into it. But what I want to do is just have the slightest touch of colouring in that base. But always blend it out so there's no harsh lines. Test the paint again in case it seeped through to the paint and made itself stronger. And as I've mentioned before, I always paint with two brushes, one with water, one with paint, so that I can quickly blend out without rinsing my paintbrush every time, just wasting paint. And I'm also going to work on the buds themselves. Okay, so now I'm going to need that rose to dry. Make sure both of my paintbrushes are clean. So while I'm waiting for the rose to dry, I'll move to another area. I think we'll do the stem. So whenever I do any sort of wood, be it a stem, a staff, whatever, I like to model my browns. So I'm going to pre-wet the area so the pigment travels. And don't go through and pre-wet everything because it'll dry by the time you get to it. So that's right, this colour doesn't re-wet too very nicely. And I'm not actually painting, I'm just dipping my brush in every once in a while, just so that you've got very uneven paint. I don't want a nice even coat of paint here. So back into the water and pre-wet the next section. There, and just skip that colour through. Down a little bit of the yellow. Doing the same thing, just skipping the colour through every once in a while. So nothing's even. And then I'm going to let that dry before I then decide how to keep going on that. Okay, paintbrushes are clean. The rose is now touch dry. We can move on. Okay, add a lot more water to that pink. We're going to need that very pale. Okay, preload my water brush. Using the swatch card to test the strength of your colour. Alrighty. And then blend. Now, see how I'm left with a line there? Sometimes that paint will dry into a solid line. There's nothing you can do to blend that out. And it's unpredictable. So hard to know. So if that happens, first of all, I'm evenly going to blend that water out. If that does happen, I just go over the area again and extend past it. And just cover up that line. Just a little bit more pigment. Okay, I want that pink to be reasonably strong in areas. So I'm just covering up that line. And just blending. Roses aren't meant to be a completely smooth pigment, so that's not what you're trying to do here. Trying to give it a bit of a mottled. There. So placing that colour down and then immediately going in with your water brush will prevent that line. And then you can blend onto the next part. Okay, so you'll see that I'm skipping 2 areas. So I'm going to go to the next blank area that I know is safe. Dropping in colour. Immediately water. And some areas you need to tackle in sections because it's too wide and that first area will dry out before you've moved on. Okay, touching the rose again to see if it's touch dry. This is where we can start to add details into the rose. Dry off that brush as much as I can. And this is very much where do what you want. Put in a bit of colour, then use your water brush, just blend it through. And I'm going to introduce a bit of purple into that. Mix the pink into the purple. And just using the very, very tippy brush just to move that through. And at this point my water brush is actually quite dry, but that's good because I want a dry tip just to throw that paint around. I don't want it blending out. on the very centre of the rose, just do a couple of splotches. Okay. Rinse brush. And I'm going back into the Payne's Grey. And just very tiny, tiny lines. You're basically just moving the brush over the paper. You're not really, really touching it. Paintbrush is pretty much dry at this point, but it's got just enough pigment. And those rosebuds are dry. Give them a little bit of shadowing. Might let that dry now. And we can move back to the rose branch. Yep, she dry. Same technique as before. You're just barely going to be just making little marks. You're not painting the whole area, just giving it a bit of wood type texture. That raw umber just does not want to load. Not a good colour. Does not re-wet well. Okay, so let's put a bit of brown into it. And then I'm going to go in a little bit of green. Oh, didn't pre-wet my green. Just a hint of green on the brush. And once again, you're just adding a bit of colour and texture to the wood. Does not need to be neat. You can stipple, stripe, dab. leave that alone for now. Okay, that main rose is dry. I've deliberately left those 1, 2, 3, 4 sections, the fold over, blank because I want to colour them with a very, very light shade of pink. There. And when it comes to the rose, you can keep layering the colours depending on how deep you want it. Let's have a look. Okay. Go back and darken that bit. Oops, too much. Pat, pat, pat. Disperse your mistakes. Okay, onto the leaves. There'll be a lot of repetition here. What have I got? Stimulate that sap green a lot. Water, very well loaded. I'm just going to pre-water some of these big ones. And then just dab. You can also dab dry. I don't want an even paint application. And this is why flowers and plants are so fun to make. You don't need precision. Did I miss any? Yep. Okay. And just underneath the buds. Give them a very light layer of green. Okay, while they're still wet, go into your olive green. And once again, you're just using the very tip of your brush. Just to lay down some features. Okay. And if you've gone heavily into it like I've just done, grab your water brush, blend it. And because there's still wet water from the sap green, you'll find that placing the olive green on top, it'll naturally run and blend itself. areas to be blotchy. If you prefer to do a more precise shading, you're pretty much going to repeat what you've done to the rose on the leaves. So choose your own adventure. And handling your brush differently gives you different effects. So pretty much straight on and pouncing it will help with a different blotchy. Dull texture. I often keep a completely dry brush just so that I can help texturize. But in this case, this brush is almost dry. Oh, I've missed a bit of wood. Right there. That happens. So, while I have to paint that, I'm going to add some more brown. Now we're going back into the yellow to add to that wood, and also just to add to the tips of the leaves to show that they're drying a bit. So brush that through. Go back into that darker green, olive green, and I'm going to work on the leaves surrounding the rosebuds. Also creating a shadow just where they sit under that rose. Okay, while I'm letting that dry, let's move on to the butterfly section. So for that one, I think I'm going to mix some yellow and pink. Create a whole new colour. And once again, this is where I test the colour. It's more of a peach. It's quite nice. Okay, water brush. And I'm going to flood the area. And then just lay it down. I'll often flood the area and just put down a little bit of paint. So you're tinting the water, so you know where it is. You can just see it. And then I go in and smooth it. Because you've already got a water layer down, you're not going to have the problem of it just being a stripe of paint, which can happen. Okay, because I like things symmetrical, I'm going to do the others. And that was a bit dry up there, so add a bit more water. As this is stained glass, I'm not worried about it being completely even, because different pieces of glass will have a bit more or less intensity. Oops. Okay, if you accidentally run into another section, you've got a second to pop down a bit of dry towel and then erase it. Might not work, so be very careful, don't rely on it. But sometimes you can erase just that little bit of paint onto the wrong section. That side's a lot stronger in the pigment, so I'm going to add more paint. And might as well do the bottom ones. Oops. It's way too dry. Add some water in, blend it out. Okay, now you can move to another section. Good, that's all pretty dry. I'm going to make the main colour the blue, but I also want it very shadowed. So load up my water brush. And with this technique, once again, you're going to put the water pretty close and base it in. And then blend out where it's hit that water. Trick to it all is just water control and blending. Okay, work in sections at a time, so it's all even. The beauty of this being a stained glass design is if you're a little bit choppy in your transitions, doesn't matter, it's just different pane of glass. Now the pigment will travel everywhere you've put water, so you want to try not to get into that middle frame because it'll travel through. Going back up, strengthening that shadow. And I want to re-wet the whole area, which will help with blending that second layer of shadow, but we're going to need it in a minute. Bit more of a dilute blue. Alrighty, so with the blue, I'm just going to drop the pigment all around the edge. Where needed, give it a very gentle nudge, but don't blend it perfectly. These huge areas of stained glass wouldn't be perfect. Okay. And now, going to water brush the rest of it, because I don't want any shadowing behind the branch and the trees. I only wanted the shadowing around the rose. Must have missed that bit because that went on dry. Just lay down the paint while it's wet. You can blend in a minute. Actually, you don't want to blend, but you're going to disperse in a minute. Right, now water brush. And because I don't want this perfectly blended, I'm just patting the water onto the paint so that it retains that mottled effect. And looking at that, I'm going to add a whole lot of water into that center part, and then just tip the brush, add in some pigment. And then just smooth it out without really blending. Leave it rough. This is mottled glass now. Just a bit. Okay, and then you can just spot and add wherever it feels like a bit more. Whoops, that's how I drop my brushes. Alright, so now that shadowing's dried a bit, I just want to blend it out. I'm seeing a few hard edges and I don't like that. So going in with a water brush, I'm just moving that pigment around. Now I've created one of those steps there, so I need to add a bit more to hide it and blend. It's completely normal to go back over a section 3-4 times, a dozen times, because as it dries, it will dry differently. It'll dry a lot lighter. So I often go back into sections after it's dried, or I've put the next colour next to it and just realise, no, it needs to be deeper, it needs to be stronger. So yeah, I often go back and do sections. Oops. A bit of shadow on that rose, so I'm just going to give it a big wash. Try and erase that a bit. Okay. Missed a section again. So easy to do. Alright. Now that whole area is soaked, so I'm going to pause the video, allow it to dry, because I can't go on until it's finished. Okay, now we're going to be painting the butterflies. So, what colour? Let me just re-wet my palette. Just a couple of drops. I think we're going to go for a pink, purple, blue combination. So once again, put down your paint, wet it. I'm not being too precise with the wetting it because I do want it to be a little blotchy here. Just want to gently drag that purple out. Actually, I want a bit of a stronger purple. I'll often use a dab when I'm putting down paint. Gives you a mottled effect. Quite like that. Yeah, strengthening that purple. And then into the blue. A bit of water to help spread that blue. Okay, now into the pink. Same thing. Just letting it go wild. Okay, for the center paneling, what I've done is I've made a mix chart, and okay, ignore that one because I made a mistake. But basically the way it goes is that's the pure yellow, and then if I mix it with the brown, the red, the two greens, the blue, the Payne's grey and the brilliant. So these are the mixtures that are possible when mixing at 50%, 50-50. If you use different strengths, you're going to have even more the possibilities are endless, seriously. I'm not going to sit here and do them all. So I'm just, with that outside one, I think we'll just go a bit rogue. Mix a whole heap of colours, random colours, and then just go. I'm liking the blue and the rose, so let's mix up some of that. Blue and the rose, a bit more rose. Okay, and purple and the rose. Some of the yellow with the blue. I'll show you my palette in a second when I'm just finished randomly mixing some colours here. Green with the purple. And I'm deliberately staying away from the brown because it doesn't wet very well, so it's not worth it. Do not like that colour. I'm going to ignore it. Okay, so yeah, I've just done a bit of a random mixy because this is what it's like when I go in without a plan. Alrighty, I'm going to start by wet brush, water brush, wetting down some panels. Let's say 2. Don't know what colours on my brush, doesn't matter. Oh, and this is, okay, another good reason why you use the back of your swatch. I'll tell you what colour it is. So, I want to be surprised by this inner frame and just do all sorts of colours. This could be a mistake. We'll find it. Oops, there's no water there. and decided I don't like this section, so I'm going to paint over it. Okay, something a bit more blue. Sometimes it's nice just being random, just letting go. Oops. That was an accident. Try. Haha. Alright. Back to the butterfly. Brush this a bit dry. Grab a bit of water and just wet it through. Okay. Little bit underwhelmed with these leaves, so I'm going to go into the greens, olive green, and just with the tip of my brush just do a little bit of a spinal leaf thing happening. Almost like you're doing like a pine tree or something. It's a little bit of extra dimension. You can see that I'm, yeah, don't put your finger in the wet paint. And see, I'm not being careful or precise. I'm not following the lines. Just letting it go. There is time for precision. You guys have seen how I paint. I paint very precise. But there is times when you just flick the brush around. And this is one of those times. I will take you guys through a more precise painting. Yeah, one day, but let's have a little bit of fun first before I break your brain. Okay. And as I was saying before, most of my paintings I will think that I've finished the section, but then when I've done the sections around it, I've realised that, no, that's now lacking. So I will go back in and paint sections, touch up sections all the time. I am never done. Actually, when it comes to my painting, I've got two versions of done. There is maybe done and then done. And that's usually a day later. I leave my painting on my table overnight, a couple of days, sometimes a week, depends what life's doing. And I'll go back to it and go, no, needs a bit more. So what I think I want to do now is, I've muddied up all my yellow. That's a bad thing. Just a little bit of a weird browny purple colour, just at the tips. Kind of like, dead leaf kind of thing. Once again, scribbling. Today is a scribble paint. I don't paint flowers or roses all that often. So probably not the best teacher for this. There are millions of much better actual plant painters. I just like the stained glass effect. So I'll put a bit more brown into these ones, because thought process is they're older, therefore going to be a bit more brown. And yikes, way too much brown on that. Gonna water that down, just let it go. Touch of brown up here. And just do these little circles. A little bit of purple detail in these wings. They're a little bit plain. Once again, just the very, very tip of the brush. Not leaning into it at all. And I think we're done. So I hope you all enjoyed that, and I'd love to see your version of it.